Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. What a fantastic day we're having. And this panel discussion I've been really looking forward to because it strikes me we've talked a lot about the purpose of assessment. We've talked quite a bit, we've heard a lot from different speakers today around the problems with our current assessment system. But now I think we're all ready to hear about some solutions and to hear from some educators and school and system leaders who are actually sort of taking the nettle, grasping it and saying, okay, we're going to do things better. We've got a vision of how we can create a fairer, more equitable, more effective assessment system. And the focus of this session is around the equity piece and around hearing practical examples and inspiring examples from school and education leaders. So first of all, I'm just going to ask our panellists to introduce themselves in one sentence, who they are and the setting or school that they come from. Then we're going to invite them each just to crystallise and summarise the equity challenges that they think the current assessment system poses, if you like, the drivers that have galvanised them to do something different. And then we're going to give the majority of time to our panellists to talk a little bit about the initiatives and the actions they're taking in their schools. I'm going to try very hard to leave a few minutes for questions from the floor as well. So let's just go down the line, starting with Helena. If you could just in a sentence tell our audience a little bit about who you are and where you've come from.
Hello everybody, my name is Helena Good. I am one of the directors in Daydream Believers. Firstly, we are nothing to do with the monkeys, but we do have our own funny walk. Not unlike the monkeys, we have created free online resources and playlists that support creative thinking. Daydream Believers, very simply, is a group of people, educationists, employers, who looked at the what and the why and created a how.
Thank you, Helena. The fact that Helena broke the rules does not allow the other four not to do one sentence. Gavin.
My name's Gavin O'Loughlin. I'm a Year 5 teacher from a school called Golfton CP in North Wales. Is that short enough?
Thank you very much. And Kimberley.
I'm Kimberley Elms. I'm the principal of the Livingstone Academy in Bournemouth.
Brilliant. Al.
I'm Al McConville. I co-founded Rethinking Assessment with a number of other people in this room. I'm deputy head at King Alfred School in London, and I co-founded the School Directed Courses Consortium.
I'm Nicola Mason, the head teacher of School 21. School 21's a 4 to 18 school in Stratford, serving or working with 1,200 students.
Thanks very much, everybody. At Rethinking Assessment, we often hear the argument from certain people in government, from certain people in other education sectors, that the current assessment system is the most equitable, that terminal standardised exams sat by everybody on the same day at the same time is the fairest, most equitable system. And we fundamentally disagree with that. So I'm going to invite our 5 panellists just to say a little bit about why they think there are equitability issues with our current assessment system. And I'll start down at the other end. So Nicola.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. I think we had a really engaging keynote this morning, and Beatrice spoke to us about the fact that we are layering purpose after purpose on our current assessment system, and I think that that's one of the ways in why it's not fit for purpose. How assessment is done is a second reason why I believe that it's not fit for purpose. So we are predominantly basing it on an end-stage written exam that students do at the end of the course. And that means that it's losing a love of learning. That was also spoken about this morning. So we want our young people to leave education being able to be prepared to continue their learning as they face the challenges that are unknown to us now, and that they can continue to engage with the world around them. I also feel that it doesn't value or evaluate the things that we believe in, the things that we think are important. So that's the competencies and dispositions that Bill spoke to us about earlier, the skills that will make them successful in life. And I think for these reasons, these multifold reasons, are why that it increases the disproportionate impact on those who have different needs within our schools. So, for example, we work really hard to have an inclusive classroom, and then we, as we heard from the youth panel this morning, we then sit learners in different spaces within our school and therefore really highlight their learning needs. looking at education in a different way will mean that we're enabling access to education and successful outcomes for all young people.
So what you're finding, Nicola, in a very pluralistic school community is that the already disadvantaged are additionally disadvantaged by our current assessment methodology. Thank you. Al?
Yeah, I thought the student panel earlier it kind of encapsulated the various layers of inequity in the assessment system. So there was the socioeconomic disadvantage of some of the candidates that came to the fore there. There was something around neurodiversity and the fact that if you're not neurotypical, then you're already disadvantaged and your skills are not necessarily recognised within the assessment system. I thought there was something interesting too about just the kinds of things that people are interested in not being validated necessarily by the assessment system. It drives a particular curriculum, and if you happen to be particularly interested and motivated by the creative arts, for example, the assessment system means you can't do much of that because you're pushed into this relatively narrow curriculum. And then I thought there was something, a couple of the panellists recognised that they've been advantaged by their private education, essentially, and there's an interesting kind of equity thing there too, I think, to explore a bit later.
Fantastic. Kim?
Yes. I think I agree that human beings are complex things. Human cognition is a complex thing. So whenever you try to measure that with a standardized, simple measure under the auspices of it being reliable and valid, then you, by the nature of that, create an inequitable system. But I think it's also important for us that all of these things happen in education because we don't exist in a vacuum. We exist in a society that is inequitable. And there are practices that we do because of what we've inherited from our cultural context that perpetuate that inequity. And until we are courageous enough to step away from that, to present something other, then we will continue to perpetuate that inequity.
And so the logical continuation of your argument, Kim, would be that as we see society become even more inequitable, the moral compulsion to change our assessment system becomes greater and greater.
Yeah, and I thought it was particularly powerful this morning to hear the quote of, if education really is the root of all these crises, then it is beholden on us working in that sector to make that change. Someone has to go first, so why not us?
Fantastic, thank you. Gavin?
Coming at it from a Welsh school's point of view, we've actually had a curriculum reform recently where assessment is totally changing. I think in the terms of what was our old style of assessment, where it was very standardised tests, we were then measured against other schools across the county, then across Wales. You are finding out which school is performing, and then what happens then. And from a class teacher's point of view, I'm aware of it happening in England, is you then want to get those scores up as high as you can because that's what your measure is, that's what your gauge is, that's what Ofsted want to know. They want to know how well your school's performing, and it's teaching to the test. It's if I'm measured on that, that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do the nice creative things where pupils are having those learning experiences, the residential trips, the sports clubs. Teachers are going to be asked to teach maths boosters, English boosters, reading boosters. We're looking at all those things because that's what the system at the moment is testing. It doesn't factor in individual learning styles and what pupils are interested in. It's not taking those things into account. We're not looking at the background of the children. We're not looking at the peer groups of those children and what family support they've got in place for how well they've achieved. And going back to the Welsh point of view, is that our current system, or the system that's coming into place, is on a progression scale. So pupils are no longer Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3. They are progression step 1, 2 or 3, but they can be anywhere within that progression step. And what we're measuring is value added to those pupils. I think if the current system stays in place within England, the way to beat that system is to have the maths boosters, the English boosters, because that's what your scores are all based upon.
Thanks very much. And last but by no means least, Helena, what have been the key sort of equity drivers for Daydream Believers coming into existence?
I suppose, can tell my story in the context of what's happening at the minute in Scotland. At this very moment, there are 20 schools across Scotland working on a new qualification, the equivalent of a GCSE and an AS, 4 hours a week in the senior phase. That qualification is creative thinking and innovation. Like I said at the beginning, unless we sort of look at how we can use our assessment to place value on the things that our young people are good at, to feed their energy and spirit, then we're always going to be going back around the table with the what and the why. What we've proven is that when you move from acquisition to application in your assessment process, when you take 5 simple learning outcomes, and the only outcome that is product-driven is where you say to our young people, communicate, tell us a story, make us care. Every other outcome relates to the process, your ability to research, your ability to come up with ideas, your ability to fail and fix, and your ability to evaluate. That's an equitable system because those are innately human qualities. We're born with them. Sometimes, as educators, we drum them out of our young people. And all that we're doing is looking at a way to create a really simple way to assess it, to cut teachers' marking in half, using AI, using a digital assessment tool, and fundamentally to go back to our schools and say to our teachers, we trust you and we've got you.
Thank you very much. So our 5 panellists have been invited today because they've all got stories to tell about innovative ways in which they have changed the assessment methodology within their schools or settings. So I'm going to give them 5 minutes now each to tell you the story of what they've been doing in their particular school. You may well have questions, but we'll take questions at the end of the 5 if that's okay. And I'm going to invite Kimberley to start. What have you been doing at Livingstone Academy?
Well, we've started off by taking a look at what we are a free school. We are beholden to teach the UK national curriculum. So we have rebundled that. We've gone through and picked that apart and chunked it up in ways that we think make more cognitive sense so that we can bundle them into interdisciplinary experiences. We get kids engaged in it through role play, through inquiry, through phenomenon-based, problem-based questioning, and we get them to learn some stuff, but then apply it directly into a product. And sometimes that product is rather artificially manifested so that we can meet our national curriculum standards, but other times they have some voice in what that looks like. Our assessment process is engaging the students to talk about what they've learned, to tell us their learning journey, rather than focusing on just factual recall and a standardized test. We don't really approach can we form this in a GCSE kind of question, which causes a little bit of palpitation in some of our parents and staff. But we're looking for ways to engage in what's called thick authenticity. So does it interest kids? Does it engage their hearts and their minds? And then are we able then to make it realistic so that they're seeing the relevancy of this application so that they can start to transfer that knowledge to other areas? So that's our key place is we're really trying to engage in that. How do we engage you in learning, unlearning, and relearning in a cycle? And it's harder than it looks.
Absolutely. I love that idea of learning, unlearning, and relearning. Nicola, tell us about what's happening at School 21.
I think it's important to say that, sort of building on from what Bill said earlier, that we don't believe it's a false dichotomy. We between the traditional approach and the progressive approach. Our students currently study for 8 GCSEs, and what we do is we build innovation in the curriculum around those GCSEs. So we have a curriculum called Curriculum 21. No surprises where the name comes from. And that curriculum is designed to be able to allow students to develop the dispositions and competencies in areas that wouldn't traditionally be developed through the GCSE courses. So for example, we have students in our Key Stage 3 programme, alongside studying for the national curriculum, doing escape room projects. So they design escape rooms. So that was quite interesting to hear about from the earlier speaker. Our students all from the year 5 upwards were through school, do e-portfolios, and through that e-portfolio system they're recording their learning, they're reflecting on their learning, they are presenting that learning to authentic audiences. So we work with real world partners, and the partners come into school and will give feedback to the students, also to their parents and to the staff that work with them. They gain digital badges, and we're in the early stages of developing rubrics to enable us to evaluate the learning towards our dispositions that we've developed, called the Dispositions of an Empowered Young Person. Our vision is to empower young people to take on the world. So this is to really make sure that these assessment systems are, as one speaker said earlier, trustworthy, and that we can really make sure that they're as rigorous as possible. We celebrate these, as I said, through the students presenting their work, presenting their e-portfolios. We also have exhibitions of beautiful learning that occur every term, and this is again a way that students can present the learning that they're doing and really develop collaborative skills and presentation skills. They present their work in almost like a Viva style format, so they're getting that experience of working with future employers, and the employers giving them feedback on the things that would make them successful in the world beyond school. We're exploring developing our project-based work into electives, and really exploring the passions of our staff and our students, and we're also part of the Schools Directed Courses Consortium, so we're really energised by the thoughts of working together with a group of schools to make sure that these electives can be authentically assessed courses that are recognised by UCAS. And equally, alongside one of the speakers earlier on spoke about the pace of change with this. Being a through school, I really feel that this is about working with the young people who are in our reception year group, and working with the young people who are in year 5, because it's about the future for them and what the alternatives or wraparound alternatives for GCSEs will look like.
Thank you very much. Helena, would you like to go next?
I think I want to tell you a story that landed on my phone this morning. We have a school, as I said, in Scotland. One of our schools is working with our playlist. So a playlist is 4 challenges that sit written by universities, colleges, businesses, and teachers, as part of the new qualification, go in and they download this for free. So it's 4 hours a week across an academic year. As I mentioned at the beginning, the only part of the whole assessment that's product-driven is communicate. So today I heard the story of a young student in a school. Now this student, I'm sure, is not unique to this particular school. He features quite heavily in staff room conversations at lunchtime. And if there's ever anything kicking off, somehow or other, he's a magnet to it. And that's how the teacher described them. This student has had challenges, has not engaged, and today, as part of the Places and Spaces playlist, his class have been working on a playlist that supports the sustainability goals. And the first challenge in that is called State of Being, written by a creative agency, and it supports our young people to create a well-being space in their school, create it and activate it. The theory being that if we're going to take care of the planet, we need to first take care of ourselves. So once you open up conversations like that, then you can go on to the next challenge, which is Forestopia, create a theme park connected to the ecosystem of the forest. But back to the student. This morning he stood up in front of the class and for the first time ever appeared in full uniform. He was engaged. His head teacher followed him in, unbelievably looking at him for the first time in full uniform, not quite sure if the kid had been cloned. As that student stood up and told the story, he used Minecraft. His challenge, and the only part of that assessment, was to tell me a story made me care. And the way that it was assessed was that his peers would assess whether he had done that. Did they care? As he took them through the story and showed them his Minecraft well-being space in the school, that student's eyes for the first time lit up, because what he was doing is showing us content that he had created. He had a subject that he cared about. So that's what we're trying to do. Quite simply show how when you engage our young people, when you bring the real world into the classroom, things like that can happen.
That's an amazing story. It reminds me of what Tim Brigas would call a KES moment. Gavin?
I think going back to us being in Wales and having that digital competency framework, all schools have it, but we all deliver it in a different way. One of the ways that we use it in Golfton is that using the digital tools that we've got available to us through Wales's Hub platform, we have access to Google Workspace for Education, Office 365, Minecraft for Education, Adobe Express, and several others. And what we've done is we've tried to make sure that we are implementing those tools for our pupils in a progressive manner. So I taught year one for 5 years prior to going into up to year 5. And what I wanted to make sure was that the skills that we were developing with our year ones were then being built upon in the following years and weren't lost when I made that move, with the teachers saying, oh, they can't do it anymore, which is what they said. But what we did was we developed a plan of a progressive, this is what's done in year 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it now holds the teachers to account more than the pupils being able to show those things. And I think it's important that as teachers we're giving the pupils the opportunities to be able to develop those skills and those learning experiences. Because if as teachers we are not giving the pupils opportunity to deliver those things in those different ways, they're not going to be able to develop them. From that, we also have we have e-portfolios as well through the Google Workspace for Education. We start with pupils in year 3, and then they move up with the pupils through to year 6. Because of the way the Hub platform in Wales is, they can then carry those through to secondary school with them as well. And I think similar to what you were saying with the reflection processes, in Wales we have 4 purposes for our curriculum, and that's 4 purposes set across the whole country. And that's what, as a country, we aspire for all our pupils to be. The first one being ambitious, capable learners, and then there's a set criteria for what an ambitious, capable learner looks like. So in reflecting in their work that they've created digitally, and it can also be done within work that they've done in their books, or whether they've just done something within one of the other subjects that may not have any tangible evidence unless it's been filmed. The pupils then add that work, but we ask them to reflect on 2 things. We ask them to reflect on what did they learn while they were doing that, and also how is doing that learning activity allowed them to fulfill the 4 purposes and the characteristics of them. So as our pupils progress through the school, they are getting a deeper understanding of what the Welsh education system is hoping to achieve. And I think within doing that, we're then enabling them to go up to secondary school, where our pupils are able to leave and create their own websites. I think, if you were looking at when they're leaving, you've got those that are more academic, or those that are more hands-on. They're able to create their own portfolio tailored to their skills, their achievements, their accomplishments, and they're able to reflect on those. So to us as a primary school, we still see these as the CVs of the future. So enabling us to then, as teachers, we don't go onto their portfolios and assess them. What we've done is we've assessed the piece of work through formative assessment while they've been working, and what we are able to do is go onto their portfolios, and we're able to assess how well we've done our job. We can look at has that piece of work done what I wanted it to do? Has there been any other learning experiences that the pupils feel they've learned that maybe are a side of what we were hoping for? But it's constantly allowing the pupils to be able to do those things, and then we are being assessed as staff. Are we giving opportunity for them to be able to work at the correct level? Are we giving them opportunity for them to be able to implement it at the right level? And following on from a comment that was made earlier with creativity isn't the finger painting. Creativity is being able to use the knowledge that you've got in a way that you choose to show that knowledge. So as our pupils progress, we don't dictate, right, you're going to make a Google Slides presentation on this. They've got the choice of using Minecraft for Education, Adobe, they then choose how they want to show that work, the way that they've chosen and the way they've understood it.
Thanks very much. And Al, what's happening at King Alfred's?
So before I got to King Alfred's, I worked for 14 years at Bedale School, and that's where I sort of became emboldened to do the stuff that we're now doing at King Alfred's. So tiny bit on that. At Bedale's, students just take 5 GCSEs, and the school generates the rest of the curriculum, and the school generates the assessment methodologies for the rest of that curriculum. So they write their own courses, they design the kind of a balanced assessment methodology for each course that's appropriate to what the kids are doing in that course, and they package that up and send that off to universities. They've been doing that for 15 years, so I was privileged to be part of that process, and it's no bar to their success. This is an independent school in Hampshire. So that was my kind of training ground for realising that you simply don't need 9 GCSEs, you don't need 8 GCSEs, you don't need 7 GCSEs. The rest of the world does not require these things. It's necessary for certain accountability metrics in the state system, and that's not fair, because other schools are able to kind of grasp their freedom and do more interesting work than that. So I've taken some of my learning from there, and at King Alfred, which has always been a kind of an innovative school in itself, we've started to reduce the number of GCSEs that students are doing, and to design our own curriculum and to design our own assessment regimes for those courses. So we could just do that on our own, but we're very committed to doing that with other schools, partly because of the inequity of privileged schools like ours essentially advantaging ourselves further by being able to honour the development of the kinds of skills that we know they need, and by having the freedom to give them the kinds of experiences that we know will make them thrive and be successful in the real world. So we haven't got as far as Bedale's yet, but we've got 2 courses that are not GCSEs that are already running, and we're bringing another one on stream next year. So actually, as part of the school-directed courses consortium, we had a meeting of a dozen or so schools last week where we kind of peer-reviewed a proposed course, and it was incredibly helpful for us to have input from other imaginative and creative schools on what a great literature course looks like. So we're going to run a literature course instead of English GCSE literature, which we find a bit humdrum. And that's been kind of co-designed, and we think that people will have a much better experience through doing this. So the consortium is designed to be a sort of peer support network of schools who want to get on with building a grassroots movement to create our own curriculum, to recognise that 9 GCSEs is not required. Even under Progress 8, you don't need 9. And to encourage schools to get together and kind of co-validate alternative learning experiences that fulfill the kind of assessment needs that we're seeing today, and to bring that innovation on. So we're seeking to build a bit of kind of critical mass around schools doing their own thing, even if it's only in small pockets at the margins to start with. And there are a number of those schools represented here today that have been doing this for years. So it's not just Bedale's that's been doing this for years. There are other schools that have been doing this for a long time. So us kind of convening that group is our sort of attempt to level the playing field a bit.
Thanks very much to all of you for being really clear but also really succinct and allowing us a good 10 minutes for questions and comments and reflections from the floor. You've probably got a myriad different thoughts jumping around in your mind, but do put your hand up if you'd like to put a question to the panel. It would be fabulous if it could be expansive enough to include a couple of people in it, but if there's specific questions to individual school leaders, that's fine too. Yes. Go for it.
Thanks. Hello. Oh, sorry. I was just curious, Al, about the literature qualification you were talking about. What is it that you are assessing the students on that isn't assessed in the literature GCSE, and how do you go about doing that? I'm sure there's too much for a quick question, but more detail would be really interesting.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. So we're trying to balance the fact that in the end we're wanting to find out how sophisticated young people are in their engagement with literature, but not only via a timed exam. So we're seeking different kinds of evidence of their ability to engage with literature. So yes, there will be an exam. There'll also be some continuous assessment. There'll also be a viva, and there will be choice. So one of the things that we want to do is to give people choice of the texts that they engage with, and to find ways of them responding to things that they feel really ownership of. So yeah, it's still about literature. We're not calling it English literature because we want to be able to have texts from around the world, and we want to be able to have texts in translation, but we want pupils to be able to engage with those texts in different ways, and present their knowledge and understanding of those texts in ways that are not just a written exam.
Thanks for the question. Next one's up the front.
Yes, as a Scot who's spent most of his education time in England but has recently been working in Wales, I really do think that there's a lot to be learned from Wales at the moment. I think if people are not familiar with the curriculum, they should have a look at it. It is really quite inspiring. The sad thing is that if you talk to people, the powers that be in England, what they say to you is, yes, but the PISA scores in Wales aren't as good as England. And I find that very sad. But it really is worth looking at the Welsh curriculum.
Gavin, I think you'd echo that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if just mentioning the PISA results, it goes back to what I said right at the start. If that's the metric that you're measuring yourselves against, then that's what you need to teach to. You know, they are the experiences that you're going to give your pupils. You're going to give them the experiences to be able to perform well within that test, within that structure. Within Wales, as I said, we've got the progression steps now. So it's much more about the value added to individuals rather than, the ludicrous nature of last year you had 85% pass at this level, and then saying to the class teacher, this time you've only had 75. What's happened? Well, 30 different kids in my class. You know, it's quite simple when you explain it, but when people look at data and figures without context, that's what you get. Whereas if you're then looking at how much value added is to the individuals and taking them as individuals, that's what, to me as a teacher, the purpose of it is. You know, we're trying to succeed for all those, not just hit I need 40% of this and 60% of that, and it just doesn't work.
Thank you very much. Next question.
Thank you. This is directed to Nicola. I just wanted to know, have you seen a relationship between the students who are, or all your students who are engaging with the sort of interdisciplinary study, and then how that has had a knock-on effect on the 8 GCSEs or the 7 GCSEs that they're doing? So have you seen sort of a boost in the GCSEs as a result of them developing, greater resilience and creativity in the other sort of other assessments that they've been doing? And then my second quick question is just about any resistance that you may have faced from other stakeholders, parents, for example, or even students questioning, what is the point of me doing this if I'm not going to get, a standardised qualification at the end of it?
And we might extend that question about resistance to anybody on the panel, because you might all have experienced that. But let's start with Nicola.
Okay, thank you. So I think the beauty of School 21 is that it was founded with students in Year 7 and in reception. So the students that have been with us have always had Curriculum 21, so that I can't compare how they were before at GCSE in terms of those transferable skills. I think if I'm honest, we still have more work to do to make sure that we're ensuring that that love of learning that we have in the interdisciplinary work transcends into the GCSE courses. And I think one of the challenges in a high accountability system is that the focus on exams sometimes can narrow a teacher's thinking about where their priorities are. So students do definitely take those dispositions into the GCSE course, but I think there's more that we could do. To answer your question about resistance, again, I would say that I guess we recruit teachers who have a love of doing things differently, but we have that balance to play between how do I ensure that my students do well in the exams versus how do I develop their creativity. So like Gavin was speaking about, if the system is being measured by the exam results, how do we continue to get teachers to be creative and take risks in their learning? And I think particularly as the school progressed into A-level, that was one of the biggest challenges.
Thank you for that kind of candid, really honest response. Anyone else want to pick up on the issue of resistance from any interest group, students, teachers, parents?
I'd like to just talk a little bit about not necessarily resistance, but people who, we're in inner city Bournemouth, which is an area of very high disadvantage. We also have a very diverse population. We have a lot of immigrants and first-generation British students. So there is a marked desire in a lot of our parents for something other because they didn't have success in the traditional system. They don't trust the traditional school system. They don't understand how it works, how to navigate it. So I think what we don't see resistance, but they don't always trust what we're going to do because they don't understand it. So they know that they don't want what they went through for their children, but they're not sure what we're doing is the right thing because no one else is doing it, and they want to see, well, how do I know? Nobody wants you to monkey with their kids. Second monkey reference up here on the panel. But so they're not interested in experimentation, but yet they know they don't want that whatever that traditional thing is. So I think it's not resistance necessarily, but it's
like
something
nervousness.
else. Yes.
Yeah, fascinating. I think we've got time for one more question. Thank you.
Pressure having the last question. Kind of building on that idea of resistance, I was curious to find out, like, how have you taken your teams on a journey of unlearning? So how have you taken your teachers and brought them with you away from like a really kind of institutionalized, standardized vision of assessment towards a more broader definition of how you see that?
Could that be answered by anybody? Let's start with Helena.
Great question. Because it is all about the questions, and I think if anything over the last month with what we've seen with AI, the answers are no longer relevant. If ChatGPT can write me an answer, then we as teachers have to come back and fundamentally support our young people as mentors and coaches. We have to be able to enable our young people to ask the right questions. Now, that, when you talk about resistance, I can hear myself saying, that's all very well, Helena, but I've got to go back tomorrow into a class of 30. What happens next? And I think when you say to teachers, let's just start with this very simple statement, we trust you. We trust that you're in this profession because you care deeply about our young people. We trust that you have an innate ability over your expertise and experience to assess. And we trust that you can make that assessment simple, transparent, and robust. And if you then said to our employers, okay, you know how this works, now create something and support as a stakeholder that change. Bring those real world challenges, those real world questions into the classroom so that our young people can engage with that directly and we ignite that spark in them again. So I think in answer to the, you know how to do this. It's our role as all our stakeholders to support that fundamental change from the sage and the stage to the mentor and the coach. And any way that we can do that has to be a step forward. And I think just to finally, you'll like this one, just one statement. IDEO, who many of you know, an amazing American organization, their statement is, don't get ready, start. And I think that it's been from my point of view, it's been a privilege to hear how these people, my colleagues along here, have just started, somehow boarded the supertanker, got on board, and are fundamentally the speedboats in education. And I think that's what we're all been called on to be today.
Thank you, Helena. That is a perfect wrap-up. I think I speak for everybody when I say, panel, we absolutely salute and applaud you for grasping the nettle, for doing assessment differently, and for really inspiring us all this afternoon. Thanks very much.